All right, welcome everyone to today's Title Topics webinar. These are ALTA's presentations we offer every month on issues and important to title professionals. I am Jeremy Yowie, Alta's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a fantastic webinar lined up to help you get focused on improving and expanding your operation and instead of getting mired in the day-to-day tasks that we all often get pulled into. Before starting, I need to touch on a few housekeeping items. A copy of today's presentation can be downloaded from the handout section on your screen. All participant lines are muted for the presentation. If you do have a question, please submit them through the questions box. We'll hold some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And as an added benefit, our presentation is being recorded. After I've got the file processed, a recording will be available on Alta's website at alta.org/title topics. You'll also get emailed a direct link to access the recording as well. I need to thank Fidelity National Title Group for sponsoring our Title Topics webinars this year. Their support allows us to continue providing these educational opportunities free of charge. With that out of the way, let me briefly introduce today's speakers. First, we have Brianne McDaniel of Title Insurance Consultants. Before starting the consulting firm, Bree worked for several Maryland-based title companies since entering the industry in the early 2000s. Bree has great knowledge on helping with software optimization so you can run your operation more efficiently. Next, we have Cindy McGovern of Orange Leaf Consulting. Cindy, also known as the First Lady of Sales, has been building, training, and coaching sales teams for years. And some of the information she's going to share will help you create a plan to grow revenue and develop your staff. And as Cindy likes to say, grow big or go home. Also joining us is Ethan Pausner of Fidelity National Title Group as Director of Compliance, Market, and Technology Development. Ethan has a broad perspective and strong understanding of metrics and to help title agencies looking to become more profitable, grow market share, and acquire other business. Rounding out our speakers today is Kay Underwood of Title Insurance Consultants as well. Before venturing out as a consultant, Kay spent 2 decades at North American Title Company, and during her time there in many roles, she gained the knowledge and credibility needed to deal with all aspects of a title company. And with that out of the way, Cindy, I will turn the reins over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We want to thank you guys for all being on the webinar today. We have joined forces and are super excited to bring this to you because one of the things that we all talked about with our clients that we run into is everybody ends up working in their business versus working on their business. And what we all try to do in our various roles and our consulting with our clients is try to help them to work more on their business so you can grow and thrive even more. And so when we started talking about doing a webinar, we wanted to give you enough tidbits of each of the sections that we see people kind of struggle with in their day-to-day operations. So we're going to go through all 4 in terms of operations, technology, metrics, and sales to give you some really actionable items that you can actually implement right after the webinar today. So first things first, I want to actually pop it over to Bree here. Bree, tell us a little bit about what you think it means to be working more in your business.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks again, Jeremy, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to the call as well. So working in your business is just that. You are too busy doing your day-to-day stuff, such as reviewing your titles, answering client questions, conducting the closing, sitting at the table, getting ready for a file to fund, reviewing and managing your day-to-day employees, so taking care of any issues that you have. So really doing, the nitty-gritty of title and working in the business all day as opposed to on.
So really what we're saying is if you are finding yourself actually producing the work, working with client interface more than you're working on strategy and that sort of thing, you're probably working in your business, right, Bree?
You got it.
So then tell us a little bit about, Kay, bring you in here, my friend. Tell us a little bit about working actually on your business and what we mean by that.
So working on your business is focusing more on the the strategies and the long-term goals and plans, as opposed to, as Bree said, doing more of the day-to-day tasks and actually producing the product that we all produce. Trying to improve your workflows, work on quality control issues, ideas for expansion, anything like that would be considered more working on it as opposed to working in it.
Makes sense to me. And, you know, when the four of us joined forces to talk through this, we discussed why this is so important. And we came up with a couple of ideas of why we think it's important. Ethan, I'm going to let you take those on.
Thank you, Cindy. It's hard to understate how important it is to be working on your business as opposed to be working in your business. But primarily, it's because when you work on your business, you have the time to think, be strategic, make things happen. Instead of being the dog wagged by the tail, you can be the dog wagging the tail. Typical things that you can plan for and create systems to handle would be employee turnover. It's always going to happen. If you work on the business, as an example, you can take the time to develop a training system so that you're not constantly struggling every time a new employee comes in on how to train that employee. Those are just a couple, that's just a simple example. The other ones listed here, including how to plan for business interruptions. Today, for example, we had ice storms in southwestern Michigan, and a number of businesses had to figure out what they were going to do when their business was closed for an hour because there was no power. So it's important to be able to do that, and you can't do that while you're working in your business.
Could not agree more. And so today we wanted to give you, like I said, 4 ideas of areas where we feel very strongly that you should be paying attention to working on your business in your agency. And I know we've got some attorneys on the phone as well. This absolutely bears for you guys as well. So the first thing is really around the metrics and how you actually are preparing to manage to the metrics and by the metrics. And then secondly, we're going to talk a lot about operations and how you're preparing for those workflow pieces, how you can use technology to support that, and finally focusing on the growth area. One thing that I will also mention in going into this today is think about, before we move to the next slide, just pausing and now thinking about the difference between working in your business and working on your business. Which of these 4 is the one where you go, gosh, I really should be paying more attention to number 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then pay specific attention to that area and make some actionable items for yourself when you get off the phone today so that you can actually start moving it forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ethan to talk with you about metrics.
Thank you, Cindy. So the title industry is constantly facing, I'm using air quotes here, challenging times. But in the 23 years I've been in the business, some of the problems are predictable. Currently, though, just to keep things fresh, the number one thing I'm hearing about is staffing and training. Staff is getting older, retires. How do you find new employees? How do you train them? There's increased risks from cyber fraud, not just the technical problems, but the practical problems of your customers not falling into the traps. The legal issues, of course, of not being named in lawsuits, even though you're going to be named, even if it wasn't your fault. And most recently, the biggest challenge I'm hearing about is the decreasing amounts of business. Well, it's essential to be able to handle or deal with these problems that you have cash reserves, money in the bank. Where does the money come from? It comes from the difference between your revenue and your expenses. And of course, to have more money, you need to either increase your revenue, decrease your expenses, or a combination of both. And that's really the main focus of why we're talking about working on your business as opposed to in your business, so you can plan on how to do these 3 activities. But there's an interesting problem that occurs once in a generation, and I'm calling it the succession planning or retirement problem. We've been receiving a number of calls from agents who are looking to get out of the business. And the number one question they have is, how much is my agency worth? And the number 2 question is, who can I sell it to? Well, the value of your agency is determined by a lot of factors, but the thing you really need to focus on is that it's going to be based primarily on these 3: the total amount of business you're doing, the profits you're making, and the profit margin. To increase the value of your business, whether it's for you, your heirs, or your buyer, you're going to need to increase revenue, decrease expenses, or a combination of both. What's the point? The point is that whether we're talking about the continual cyclical challenges facing the industry or a once-in-a-generation problem of succession planning that's facing the industry, you need to become adept at working on your business. How do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is to learn to change our profit and loss statements from being rear view mirrors and turning them into strategic tools. How do you do that? Well, you don't do that by working from your stomach, working from how you feel about the business, working, for example, by looking at the office and determining whether your agents, your employees, I'm saying, are looking too busy or not looking busy enough, or whether customers are calling to complain. You also don't look every month at your P&L and say, oh, good, we have enough money to cover expenses this month. I don't have to dip into savings, even though it's the winter. You need to be more systematic about that. In order to do that, I'm going to recommend that you start charting and keeping track in an organized fashion certain metrics. Jeremy, could you move the slide? Next slide, please. These 6 things. Oh, I'm sorry. You had jumped ahead. I wasn't looking. Back to the previous slide. These 6 things, I want to go on to introduce them as just a starter set of factors to keep track of. Open orders, meaning open orders for orders opened for title policies, not just searches. And really, if you can exclude searches, keep them out. Closed orders. Those are orders you're paid for. Number of employees. This is a confusing thing. This is the number of full-time employees. Assuming employees work 40 hours a week, you take the number of hours worked and divide that by 8 to get how many full-time employees you have. That's the number you want to measure with. Revenue, of course, equals title premiums and closing fees. If you have a law firm, that doesn't count. The law firm income doesn't count as your title insurance income you're trying to track. Total expenses are all expenses. It's all in. And of course, profit is the difference between the two. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, on this, the important thing on this slide is that the process is where the value takes place. The process of measuring each month, the process of comparing the results against goals, and the process of adjusting your operations and sales efforts accordingly. That's the value. The value is not just producing a pretty graph that you file in a notebook. It's looking at the data and working with it. Next slide, please. Here is a chart. It's going to be difficult to read, but taking the 6 factors that we listed 2 slides ago, you'll notice in the yellow is the part of the chart or the graph where the data is entered. Part of the issue, of course, is who's going to enter the data, but they get the data, they enter it into the graph. Now you can see what's going on month to month and compare accordingly. So the yellow is self-explanatory. You enter the data. At the bottom, the bottom of the yellow is a kind of a grayish line, and that's your profit. And it's not unusual to see profits going up and down each month depending on the amount of business. The switch to the chart below, same slide, but the analysis is where it gets interesting. The mostly light gray section, the matrix, shows the number of orders divided by the number of full-time equivalent employees. Open orders, closed orders, revenue. All these statistics are divided by the number of employees or full-time equivalent employees, so you can see how you are trending. And the whole beauty of working on metrics like this, and even converting it to a graph, as in the 3rd section of this page below, the blue line being open orders per employee, the orange dotted line being closed orders per employee. The beauty is you can detect trends early and react early. You'll notice in July, orders peak, then they start decreasing. and they never really come back up. By tracking this monthly and comparing, you're going to detect this months earlier than if you start reflecting back on it in October, November. And with that, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how this can work. And next, Kay is going to be talking about adjustments you can make to your operations now that you've started seeing some graphical results.
Thank you, Ethan. And I will add that I'm amazed at how many times I ask my clients questions based on the same statistics that Ethan just showed, and they have no idea what their average income per order is, or their average open and close per FTE, or those kinds of things. It really does make a huge difference. So I'm a firm believer in that, and anybody that has dealt with me knows I get on my soapbox about analytics. But now let's shift to operations. So what do we mean by operations? Basically anything that's not sales related. Everything from getting the order in, once it's in the door, all the way through producing commitment, preparing settlement statements, performing closing, producing policy recordings, everything. All of those functions would be considered what we consider operations. Jeremy, if you want to flip to the next slide for me, please. One of the easiest ways to, and ways that you can look at your operation on your own, is to take a step back from a disinterested third-party perspective and look at what is actually happening on the front line. Very often, what management ownership thinks is happening doesn't match up with what is actually happening. And sometimes it takes bringing a third party in to look at that to really be able to see those differences. But simple questions to ask yourself: how many times are you touching a file? How paperless, honestly, is your process? I think we all know the answer to that is it's never 100% paperless. I've never seen it happen. But you would be surprised when you really start to look at the actual functions of what your frontline employees are doing, the areas for improvement. I would almost guarantee you there's at least one person in your organization right now that would receive a document via email. They would print it off, get up, and go scan it back into themselves. Everybody laughs when I say that, but I promise you it's happened in every operation I've walked into. And it's a very small thing to watch for, but it's very telling. You can flip to the next slide, Jeremy. So if you're looking at the flow of a file, if you're looking at what your frontline employees are doing, obviously, to me, the easiest way to do that is to follow the flow of a file, which is very basically broken down here. But again, how that order comes into the office, all the way through entering into the production software, ordering search, preparing the commitment or title report, depending on what part of the country you're in, preparing documents, processing the file, clearing title requirements, all of those items, all of those different touch points. If you sit back and look at that from a very disinterested third party and really start to focus on what the frontline employees are doing, you will probably find a lot of room for improvement in efficiency. This industry, we get very steeped in our historical processes, the way we've done it for 20 years. This is how we do it. Why? We don't know. This is just how we do it. But if you also compare that to what technology has done over the last 20 years, it doesn't make sense that we're doing things the same way we were 20 years ago. Probably not. So that's a basic thing to do. Anybody can do that at any level, but definitely if you come at it from a very neutral perspective, you will identify room for improvement probably across the board. Jeremy, you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. And that very much ties into technology, which I am going to let Bree handle.
All right. Thanks so much, Kay. Yep, you teed it up great for me. Thanks so much. So yes, on the technology side, let's face it, we're all addicted and dependent on our technology. Where would we be without our cell phones and, being able to do everything on a computer? Having started in the title industry when I did everything on a typewriter, I can totally tell you I would not want to go backwards and go to that. So since we have to use all of this technology to complete our work, it's extremely important that we pay attention to it. It's a crucial part of our daily lives, not only at home, but at work as well. So Jeremy, if you want to flip to the next slide for me. A couple of questions you can see here that you can ask yourself about your production software, how things are working. So, are you using the latest version of your production software? If you're not, why? I would always ask why. We get these soft grade up versions not only for security and compliance, but typically when your production software is upgraded, you get a little bit of enhanced functionality as well. So it's extremely important to make sure you're doing that. So many times I see frontline employees using workarounds because the software doesn't follow the actual process, as Kay was stating, and that kills efficiency and eventually morale. So it's important to make sure we've got our platform updated so that they can get the most out of their system. Ethan showed you some great analytics you guys should be using, and can your software provide that information for you? Can you get that data out of your software system? You should be able to, and if you can't, be sure to ask your software provider to see if there's a piece that you're missing or you're just not aware of something, so that you can make sure you're getting all of that information. And again, Kay touched on it as well, becoming paperless. So we found through our travels with all of our different clients that typically when you transfer from a paper-heavy office to a paperless office, you increase efficiency by anywhere from 12 to 18%, sometimes as much as 25%. And having that extra time and day is a great way to provide excellent customer service to your clients. So it gives people the opportunity to answer questions, and deal with that face-to-face interaction that they don't have the time for when searching through all that paper. So important to do that as well. If you want to go ahead and flip to the next slide. Thank you. So, our process in the title industry, or our flow of the file changes for many different reasons. Some due to, legislation changes, thank you, TRID, sometimes because, of technology, our software changes, our staffing changes. So again, we need to make sure that any of those changes have made it to our software system. And I would guess most of you don't have had a process change since you instituted your software, and those changes probably haven't made it into your system. And that's what causes some of those workarounds I was talking about earlier. So having employees work around the software system just makes things very cumbersome. So make sure you're talking to your team and finding out from them, what they really like, what they see as being a problem. Again, operations and technology tie hand in hand because your operations staff use the technology to do their job. So it's important that you're speaking to them. If you're one of the few companies where your software is actually on point, a couple of other things to look at would be the rest of your IT setup. Maybe it's time for you guys to upgrade your internet speed so that people are moving faster, doing what they need to do, or increase the storage space on your servers, same thing, to help speed up the system. Maybe it's time to invest in new servers so you guys can round robin and cut down on latency in the system. A couple of other quick fixes are looking at e-faxing. If you haven't already chosen to use those, great way to speed up efficiency for your employees. And the last one, make sure you have a full service PDF tool like Foxit Phantom or an Adobe that, again, they can easily convert documents on their desktop. They don't have to print and scan to themselves. Huge time saver, makes life easier. And when you do these things, make sure you're communicating to your team so that they know what's happened and what's changed and what to look out for. So all of these things help to make life a little easier for your staff and increase productivity. And now that they've got all this free time on their hands, we'll kick it over to Cindy and sales so she can talk about how they can continue to help grow the business.
Absolutely. So just as a quick little recap, all of the things that we've talked about today actually parlay into sales, because we've got to have those metrics that we're looking at where we've set goals with regard to how many deals we want to bring in, how many open orders, how many closed orders. You can even set sales goals with regard to how many new clients you want, or if you have a dedicated sales professional, how many appointments they want to have with prospects. So, all of these things kind of play into that. And then you look at the operations team and decide, are they part of your sales effort? my answer to that always is yes. I think every job is a sales job, but looking at how you're feeding that into the processes that you have in place. And then finally, how is technology supporting your sales effort or making it more difficult? And so when we look at sales in terms of working on your business, the first thing I think we have to address is how you get everyone involved, defining who is primarily responsible for sales, and then what's actually working. How are you tracking it? And what roles is everybody else playing? And like I said, I believe every job is a sales job. I believe that if you can tick off a customer, if you can make a customer's day, or you can even just influence another human being to think positively or negatively about your company, then you're in sales. So when we start thinking about how we're working on our sales business, my first question is, does your team know that? Do they all know that they are salespeople? Jeremy, you can go to the next slide for me, please, sir. So once we start talking about the fact that everybody's in sales, you get this face, of course. I love this little gal. You got to get over the ick factor of sales. And when you say the word, I guarantee you your escrow officers, your closers are going to go, I'm not a salesperson. I'm an escrow officer. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a processor. I'm not a salesperson. I'm in post-closing. I'm not a this. Guess what? You know my definition. You're absolutely in sales. And part of what ends up happening and why we don't work on the sales side of the business is because we shy away from it. We end up shying away from it because we go, gosh, that closer's got a big desk and we can't rock the boat. That closer's big desk is actually your best opportunity to parlay that into more business. And unless he or she sees every interaction as a sales interaction, we might be leaving business on the table. Now, we're not having everybody go out and just make cold calls. In fact, in today's day and age with technology and with how small the world is with social media, you probably shouldn't ever have to make a cold call, quite frankly. But reminding your team that they've actually been selling their entire lives. That's where you start. So when you start to work on the sales effort, you probably need to have this conversation with your team. Do all the things that Kay and Bree and Ethan talked about, and then bring everybody together and say, guys, here's where we want to go. We want to set some goals. We want to help everybody be even more successful, have more fun, take care of our customers even more, and reminding them they already sell every day. And the way they sell every day is they're convincing customers, to not jump off the ledge when their closing is going to be 30 seconds late. They are convincing their spouse to go for pizza instead of Chinese. They are literally selling all day, every day. They just don't call it sales. But what you're going to have to do to work on sales with them is to help them find their words. And that's a lot of the work that Orange Leaf ends up having to do with our clients is we don't give them a script. And some people love scripts, and that's fine if that's you. I don't believe in them because I think scripts are just that. They're someone else's words. So I think when we're truly working on the sales effort, we have to spend the time to help people find how comfortable they are with saying, hey, I've loved working with you. Is there anything else I can open for you before we close our call today? Or is there anything else you're working on that I can assist with? Play to the strengths of each individual. And this is the part where when we're working with an agency or an attorney's office, they're struggling with finding the time to do just this, because this slide, the things in here take a lot of time. The other slides I'm going to go through are things that you can build into the life of the process. But this initial kickoff with your team to say, guys, we're going to focus on the sales effort and everybody's going to be a part of it. And it's actually going to be really fun. And I'm going to empower you and help you. But you've got to find the time to coach. And what I would also caution you on is you've got to inspect what you expect. You guys have all heard that saying before. But make sure you're going to keep your foot on the gas here. Make sure that if you are truly going to start working on the sales effort, you keep that accountability going, because if you take your foot off the gas and, we're about to go into spring market, and for some of our clients, I would say spring market has already hit. When you get busy, this is the one that falls by the wayside. You'll still do operations. You're still going to utilize technology. You might even still look at the numbers. This is the one that's going to go away. So in order to truly be able to consistently work on your business, you have to have that resolve as the leadership to make sure this isn't going to go away when you get busy. But I have some ways to help you. So Jeremy, go ahead to the next slide. So I have a firm belief that sales is part of every interaction. And I think once you establish your growth goals, you look at the strategies and tactics that you want to use to get there. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, but I call them my 6 R's, which are easy ways to involve sales in your day-to-day conversations with clients, with even some prospects, with some folks that maybe you just have limited interaction with. So here's what I would offer. The first one is to retain. One of the greatest sales strategies you can have is to retain the business you have. You've got raving fans out there. Do they know they should be raving about you though? Or are they silent passerbys when somebody says, hey, I'm looking for a title company. Hey, I'm looking for an attorney. Make sure your fans know how to tell your story and make sure they know how much you appreciate them. We do a lot of research on realtors and why they leave their title companies. And it's really interesting because one of the number one reasons is they feel like we got too busy for them. Well, that's kind of heartbreaking. We never want them to feel that way, but it happens. And so making sure you've got some kind of client loyalty strategy is super important. The next thing is renewing relationships. And this is the cheaters, the people that use you, but also use another company. I was coaching a sales rep yesterday, and it was really funny because she said, well, I talked to this one realtor, but he said he uses everybody. And so we're going to get every third deal. And of course, my response, being the smart aleck I am, said, well, ask him if he wants you to buy every third house from him. So make sure these folks know you want more business from them. But there's a caveat on this one when you're working on your business, which is if you're not watching how your team is behaving on the phone and in their interactions with their customers, we might actually be scaring people away. If you're answering the phone and you sound super busy and your team is exacerbated when they're talking to clients, I don't want to send you any more business because let's not forget, I like you and I'm trying not to overwhelm you. So that's an area where I think this is a great conversation and it's low-hanging fruit, but your team has to know how to go after it and, again, how to have that conversation. Referrals. Easiest thing in the world, we don't do it as a common practice. Most of you in your markets are selling to salespeople. You are calling on realtors for the most part. How do you think they get business? Referrals. They understand it, but we're not asking for them. So that's another sales strategy. You can create an opportunity where you say, hey, team, everybody this month is just going to ask 2 clients if they have anybody else we should know that we should be working with. That's it. And let the activity be the result in the beginning. We don't need to track that 5 came in and 2 of those sent orders. Just get them in the activity of doing it. And then you've got the revive folks. These are the ones that ran away from home. We don't really know why they left. Some of them we were probably happy they left. But these are really the ones that we want to go after and say, gosh, we used to work with so-and-so. Well, let's figure out, A, do we want them back? And then B, who's the best person to go have that conversation? So I would highly encourage this as kind of a brainstorming session with your team. Think about who used to use y'all and who used to work with you. And do we want them back? And if we do, what's the best way to go about it? And then the recruit is one of my most favorites because it's one of the easiest things to do. And it actually flows right into the operational aspect of your job because we already have touch points built into the life of a file. This is the non-directing agent. Now, I know we have some folks on the phone that are in markets with split closings. I get it. But there is always another side to the deal. There is a buyer's agent. There is a seller's agent, regardless of where you are. That other party is having an experience with you right now. They're experiencing your customer service regardless of whether you're conscious of it or not. That's a huge opportunity to impress them. And it doesn't take much to impress these folks, truth be told, because they're not expecting anything from you. They didn't, quote, pick you, so they're not really expecting the red carpet treatment. So they're pretty easy to get them treated a little bit better than they get treated at home. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can work this into the life of the file, but think about if you're the non-directing agent on a residential deal, and if we're talking commercial, holy moly, there's like 10 sides of this, right? But if we're talking residential deal and the other side agent, the first time they hear from us is probably some system email. Thanks, we got the order. Here's your contact person. Clear to close. Here we go. Yay. And yay, hope you enjoyed it. That's about it. What if we elevated their experience with us? What if there was a phone call somewhere in there saying, hey, we're looking forward to working with you? What if that was actually at the beginning of the transaction where you reached out and said, hey, I'm Cindy. I'm actually going to be your escrow officer on this particular transaction. I just wanted to introduce myself. Is there anything I need to know that's going on with your client during this? Maybe we need to know that their client's about to be in Mumbai for 2 weeks and they're trying to close right before that. Who knows? Get ahead of it but it's a way to truly impress that realtor on the other side. And then it goes to the final real customer, which is the actual consumer. And the American Land Title Association has done an amazing job of really reaching out to the consumer, the homeowner outreach program. I'm a HOP leader. I am a firm believer in this. If we are not doing this as an industry, and I'm saying this as all of us collective on this call, I think we're not telling our story as powerfully as we can. There is so much data available to you as an Alta member, as a member of this community, to know how to talk to the consumer. And we're coming out of the shadows in a lot of ways, and Alta's done most of the work for you, quite frankly. So look at how you're engaging with the customer. And I think a lot of it is the fact that we've always assumed the realtor was our customer, and they are. But if you're going to start working on your business in a different way, should we be focused on the customer? And you guys are probably reading the same articles and blogs that we are with regard to the fact that millennials are buying homes. They do want to know about the process of title insurance and the home buying process. I guarantee there are people on this phone right now, and I know a few of you who've had millennial customers already come in your office and basically tell you how to do your job. So these guys know who we are. We should be working on our business in a way that envelops them into the process so they feel welcome, and more importantly, they become raving fans, because these are the guys that can actually go Yelp about you. These are the guys that can do a Google review or a Facebook review. And it can be really powerful for the growth of your organization. But unless you're working on your strategies with regard to sales, these things are left to basically chance. And it's left up to the individual person on your staff to interpret that as they see fit. And I will tell you, busy people are not interpreting this as well as you would like them to. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to really work on the business with regard to a sales strategy. Jeremy, if you'll go to that next slide for me, this is my final slide here. I think if nothing else, you all should be able to have a conversation with your staff on how to ask for the business. Now, they need to know when to ask. They need to know how to do it. So that's kind of helping them find their words. But I think it's really powerful when we can have a conversation about telling somebody how much we liked working with them, and gosh, we sure would like to work with them again. And it doesn't take that much effort. I call it a hey, by the way sale. It's, hey, by the way, Jeremy, I really loved working with you. I'd love to work with you again on another deal. Got anything you're working on? Make sure your team uses this as part of their conversations with their customers. Now, again, this is an opportunity to work on your business. And I know you guys are going, gosh, this is all salesy, salesy, salesy. This is how you work on the business, though, in terms of growth. So if you do nothing else from today, I would have everybody on your team, before they hang up with a customer today, just say, I've really enjoyed working with you. Is there anything else I can open for you today? Just that simple question, because every call truly is a sales call. It is an opportunity to impress them, to wow them, to invite them to come back and use us again. So I think it's really important that we have these conversations with our teams. Now, all of these things that we've talked about today, and I know we've thrown a lot at you, and we will all be available for questions at the end today and obviously offline as well. But to wrap it up with the sales piece, I think one of the biggest challenges is this is the part that always falls by the wayside as I began my conversation with you. Unless it's built into your operational processes, unless it's built into the technology that they can't move on to the next step until they've checked the box of contacting the non-directing agent, unless you're measuring the metrics of, hey, we did contact every single non-directing agent on our files this month, that's part of why this falls by the wayside and you get busy working in the business. So I encourage you guys, as you leave today's webinar, to think about how these things all work together and make a commitment to at least one of them. And that's where I'm going to pass it back over to Ethan to give you a little bit of a summary, and then we'll give contact information at the end, of course.
All right, so our call to action today is to implement one of the 4 ideas you've seen. Now, the beauty of this is it doesn't matter which one you implement first, because you do not need to start with the metrics, then work on operations and technology, and then, and only then, after everything's perfect, start selling. Implement any one of these and the others will necessarily follow. That's the beauty of this. It's all related. Your employee satisfaction, your customer satisfaction, your service levels, everything is going to be related to how well you are running your business, using the tools available to your business, including technology and money, cash, to reach your objectives. Whether you're, and I am talking about objectives in customer service, objectives in your retirement planning, objectives in what kind of benefits you want to supply to your employees. Just start with any one of these. You'll see the improvements. And then once you've decided that it actually works, start the next one. And incrementally, you will see your agency improving. And thank you for your time. Now, Jeremy, you have some closing comments before we lead to the questions?
Hey, thanks, Ethan. Yeah, thanks all the speakers. Got some great tips on how to grow your business and track this. We do have some time, as we mentioned earlier, for some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, submit them to the questions box, and we'll pitch them over to the speakers. In the meantime, let me just kind of go through some of the wrap-up material I kind of normally go through. Just as a reminder, if you missed any of today's webinar, or you think others in the office would benefit from listening, a recording of the presentation will be available. We'll send you the link. It's also, all of our webinars are archived on the website at alta.org/title topics. And also a plug for upcoming meeting next month at Alta Springboard in Memphis, March 20th and 21st. One of the main stage conversations will be on metrics and, good conversation on looking at what other title companies are doing and how they're measuring their performance. So if you're interested in that, go to meetings.alta.org/springboard to check out the schedule for that. A few questions came in early on, and Ethan, when you were talking about metrics, and Bree, I think you mentioned it in your conversation about technology, and they were asking if the Excel spreadsheet was available to track metrics. And I think, Bree, you said a lot of production softwares should be able to provide this, and if you don't have access, maybe contact your provider and see what they can do. Anyone want to add some more color to that?
This is Bree. I think I don't know the ins and outs of the production software reporting functions, but I have not heard of one I've not heard of any system that can't export basic summary reports, including export them in Excel as opposed to just a Word document or a PDF.
Yep,
Bree,
exactly. Most of the software systems definitely have the availability to get you the data that you're looking for and how many orders you opened today, over the month, over the past year, over the past 6 years, however long you've had the software. Same thing with how many deals have closed, how many have funded, what the income looks like on that file. All of that information is usually readily available from your software system, and you can pull that data out and keep it in Excel spreadsheets and use that, manipulate those Excel spreadsheets as you see fit to track that data. And if you have a software system that isn't easily able to pull that information out, definitely check with your software provider. Like I said, there may be enhancements that you need in order to do that, or in some cases there are third-party companies that have API connections to the software and can get that data for you.
And now, would that already have kind of the macros built in, so for some of the people who don't know how to, unsure how to get the numbers to roll up?
Yep,
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And again, if you have any further questions about the Excel sheet and tracking numbers, please feel free to, reach out to Ethan or any of the other speakers. One other question on metrics as far as employees. Catherine wanted to know, how do you get the FTE number if you have part-time people as well?
Okay, a great example. Let's say you have 5 employees, 5 people. 3 of them work full-time, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. One of them works 4 days a week, 8 hours a day, and then one of them works 2 days, 4 hours a day. They come in Thursday and Friday and kind of do cleanup. So it's the one who's working 32 hours plus the one who's working 8 hours, that equals 40. So you have 5 people, but if 3 of them are working full time, one's working 3/4 time, one's working 1/4 time, that really equals 4 full-time equivalent employees. So add the hours, divide by 8.
All right, thanks. Thanks for that additional information on how to figure in that. A lot of questions rolling in, so try and parse through them here. Cindy or anyone else, maybe a little insight on how you're seeing companies dealing with the aging and retiring workforce.
I can certainly take that unless somebody else wants to jump in.
Well, we can go back and forth.
You want to take that, Ethan? Yeah.
So let's just all start with a comment. We'll just start, Cindy, and we'll start the ball rolling. Go ahead.
I think we're all running into this with our clients, and it's a real thing. I mean, we obviously know that's the whole focus, with Springboard and everything. It's the silver tsunami. I think part of the challenge is that is actually one of the number one things we need to be working on in our business is what is that succession plan? So one of the things our clients are doing and what we're trying to get them ahead of the game is looking at how long it actually takes to ramp somebody into this world. And if we're being completely honest, we know that our pool is quite shallow in terms of experienced people in the title space. So a lot of folks are having to go outside of the title industry to bring people in some of their markets. And in order to do that, that's not a 3-month or 6 months ramp up. That might be a year or more ramp up, quite frankly, depending on their skill set. So part of what we're trying to get our clients to do is look ahead beyond the headlights and be able to say, okay, if we know that this particular person is going to probably be retiring in 3 years, we need to start recruiting it now, quite frankly, and create a ramp up plan. And so part of what we're also doing is trying to capture the knowledge of those folks. I mean, we have such an unbelievably smart industry. It is hard to do what we do. And so I'm afraid that as the silver tsunami occurs, some of that knowledge is going out the door too. So I would encourage our clients, and some of the things we're doing with our clients is actually capturing that through a mentor program and getting them to start mentoring the ones underneath them, even if they're only 5 years behind them, but then that person mentors somebody that's 5 years behind them, and so on and so forth. So we're actually trying to help build that out so that that knowledge doesn't go out the door with them as well.
I would add to that.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Really quickly, one thing that Cindy touched on that I've got some clients doing, we talk about the skill set that thrives in this industry, and I've got clients that are using a plethora of personality profile. There's 100 of them out there. We all know what they are, but they have identified certain traits that seem to succeed in their existing employees. And so they are trying to find people when they have the opportunity, trying to find people that match those same personality profiles, hoping that the skill sets will translate a little bit easier. And they're having a fair amount of success with it.
And my comment would be, this is, in addition to what the prior two comments were, it's an opportunity for you to look at whether you really need to replace the person, the full-time equivalent. Because if it turns out that your staff collectively are performing activities that are of no value to the consumer, and a simple one is taking a PDF, printing it out, writing something on it, and scanning it back in. If collectively they're doing a full-time equivalent of work that's of no value to the consumer, why would you want to keep maintaining that same workflow? And then knee-jerk reaction, you have to hire someone to replace whoever just left.
All right. Thank you for that info. And Cindy, you mentioned it as well. The silver tsunami is actually a topic at Springboard as well next month. So be some good conversations on these issues. Julia posed a question and kind of, dovetails a little bit. Ethan, of what you were just talking about. And she says, say you have an escrow officer that's trying to make improvements, but not part of the operations department that is often reluctant to pursue changes. What advice do you have for this person who may be newer to the industry and may have some other thoughts on how to run an operation that's a little bit more efficient?
This may be an indirect answer to the question is when I'm doing workflow reviews with agents, I explain that there is no there's no one solution to workflow. There's no one best way to do escrow, no one best way to do title searches, et cetera. It all depends on what's going on in the office. So the next thing I say is, how do you decide when you have two competing ways to do a process, how do you decide which one is better? And the answer is, it's the one that promotes your agency's ability to obtain your goals. And in particular, usually it's their customer service goals, which means what is it your agency does that makes your agency different than your competitors? And if you believe you have a competitive advantage that you can document, then you need to start organizing your workflow along those lines. Now let me pause a minute. The newer employee who's frustrated because he or she sees some antiquated procedures in the rest of the operation, the only way to handle that is to have the rest of the staff educated in a positive sense, which means the owner or the manager has to start educating the rest of the staff on why changes need to be made. And it's not the usual explanation of we need more money, or I, the owner, need more money, or generic things. It's we all have agreed, or we all think we agree we're the best title agency, and the reason we're the best title agency is because we provide this specific feature or benefit in our service. The workflow that we're currently using doesn't help achieve that goal. So we need to start modifying our workflow to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's about as far as I can go with this. It sounds kind of vague and pie in the sky, but it really works. If people don't know which way they're supposed to be rowing and why they're rowing in that direction, no amount of preaching about changes in workflow means anything.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, whether you're, been in the industry for a while or newer, it comes down to getting your staff together and really understanding why you're doing certain processes. So Luke posed kind of the flip side, and he posed it to you, Cindy. He said, he's one of those, he's a millennial running a small agency in the Panhandle. What advice do you have for handling an escrow officer who is over 40 and seems to have a difficult time taking orders from a younger boss? She's a great asset one day and then, can be a firestorm the next day. So any additional advice you may have as to, in addition to what Ethan just provided?
Yeah, I just one quick comment on that. And by the way, whoever asked that question, feel free to message me offline and we can go a little deeper, because sometimes it's a little difficult if they're a prickly person. But if it's just someone that's sort of bucking the accountability, I might also offer that maybe she's just testing you to see if you actually have the resolve to hold her accountable. If she's truly a prickly person, has a big desk, we got to be careful about some of those aspects. But the other thing that I always tell the owners that I'm coaching is it's your business. So do you want to be held hostage by this, or is it better to truly create the expectations you have, work on the business and build the culture that you want, with the risk of possibly losing someone, and I'm not saying get rid of her. I'm not saying any of that, but the challenge becomes where Ethan started the day, which is the tail wagging the dog. So I would just encourage you to kind of look at the whole of the picture and see, okay, is this someone that is part of the future of the agency, or is this someone that was great in the past, but is actually causing more harm than good in the current culture we have? So that's kind of a very quick answer.
Okay. Yeah. And again, feel free to reach out with any of the speakers if you want to dig into this a little bit more. Paul asked, he's looking at doing a customer satisfaction survey via email after a deal comes in or after it closes. Any thoughts on this and if they're actually helpful?
I was going to say, I'll jump. Well, I was going to say, I'll jump in first, sort of from the technology side, I mean, that's super great idea, and that's a wonderful way to, use your technology instead of printing out a piece of paper and forcing them to do it at the table. I'm a big fan of hearing customer feedback from my customers, finding out how we did, what we did wrong, what they liked, what they didn't like, so I can continue to improve the process. So, some software systems, you can integrate that right and have the system automatically send it out for you. So definitely something you can do right in your technology. So that being said, I'll send it over to Cindy.
110% agree with that. I think make it easy on yourselves. But the other thing that I would say too is I think those are great, and I think they're great for sort of the Google reviews and the Yelp reviews and getting the message out there in that way. But don't be disappointed if your feedback response rate is low. Those are not terribly successful in terms of, you send out 100, you get 95 back. It's probably not going to be that way. I have seen clients who have actually done this in the room where they brought in an iPad before people leave, and they say, hey, here, while I'm, getting your final folder or whatever, if you wouldn't mind filling out a quick survey. So I've actually seen people do that. That's, you see this in the airports now when you go through TSA, you click what was your service, the green, yellow, or red button. So that's another way that you could do it. I am always a fan of getting feedback though. So I think even if you get 1 or 2 reviews, if you've automated it through technology, you got nothing to lose, quite frankly.
That's right. Automated feedback is wonderful. And Cindy mentioned it earlier, and Linda Grahovic of Fidelity also just sent in kind of a message, just reminding everyone of everything that's available in the homeowner outreach program. There is a lot of different formats, a lot of one-pagers, presentations that as an Alta member you can download, and then either, if you're giving a lunch and learn to your realtor clients, or you're having a conversation directly with consumers, just plainly kind of explaining what title is all about and the benefits and why they need an owner's policy. So I encourage you to check out the alta.org/HOP page and look at that information. Cindy, you're a HOP leader. There is a training next week in Phoenix. There'll be another one later this year in Chicago. You can go there and get trained on how to talk about the industry, and then also how to train your staff. Anything else you want to add on that, Cindy?
I do. Alta's done the work for you. I mean, this isn't an advertisement for HOP, but they've really made it easy. So I would encourage you guys to utilize the services that you have available to you. Don't go reinventing the wheel. It's there. I mean, they've got everything from rack cards to PowerPoints to everything you can imagine, newsletters, you name it. So just familiarize yourself with it. But that does bring it back to our webinar today, which is that's an opportunity to work on your business. You have to schedule time to do that.
Yep. Just a couple more questions to try and knock out here in the next minute. Any recommendations of sales softwares that can be used to contact and track prospects?
Gosh, okay. This is a Pandora's box here. There are a gazillion. Here's my best advice to you. Don't think the software is going to fix the sales problem. And the reason I say that is that's like building a home gym and knowing you don't work out at all. You need to actually start working your sales and working on it, and then look for the software that supports what you're needing it to do. Because what ends up happening is people go out and they buy like a Salesforce or something. Salesforce is like a Ferrari. It's like flying a 747. There's a gazillion buttons. Until you know, hey, here's our strategy. We've worked on our business. We know we want to track this. We know our strategy is going to be with these 3 populations, and here's what we want to do to reach those populations. You don't know what you're looking for. So that would be my caveat on technology. There are a lot of them out there that our title clients use. Even a few of our attorneys have some. They're using Sugar. They're using Salesforce. They're using, you name it, they're out there. Zoho is a great one too. But I would not go spending the money on it until you have a sales process in place. The technology was built to support a process. So again, it's like building a home gym without having an exercise regime.
I agree.
Right. One more question here, and then we'll wrap it up for today. We do have several law firms. So this is from Ryan with a law firm, and got employees that work in the title business as well as other areas in their practice. And how do you calculate the hours employees in that sense? And his question is, do you just focus on the time spent on title files?
Yes, you have to, right, that's the simplest way to do it. You have to start measuring it, which is a pain, but you have to do it because you have to have a realistic measure of what your expenses are, including the time spent on the title business.
All right. Nice and short, succinct answer for that one. So thank you. That will kind of wrap up today's conversation. Presenters, thanks again for taking some time today, and I think giving some people some a couple real quick calls to action that they can implement when they get off today's call. Again, just to wrap up, a link to the recording will be sent to you here in a day or so you can share with others, listen again. I need to thank Fidelity once again for sponsoring our Title Topics webinars. Thank you, Fidelity. I'd also like everyone on the call to make sure your company is confirmed in the ALTA registry. Just a note, because being an ALTA member or having a policy forms license does not mean your company is automatically in the registry. So go to alta.org/registry for information on that. Again, thank you all the speakers for sharing your great insight on helping everyone grow their business. Take care, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.